find different ways of styles of healing that work for you, and don't ever stop. Like keep searching and keep trying new things, because if we're not doing that, then a decent percentage of our lives is being completely formed by our own wounding.
Hello, and welcome back to Reclaim Your Radiance. On this episode, we discuss the cultural and societal impacts of what we have come to misinterpret and misrepresent in today's society when it comes to the feminine and masculine energies. They're also known as yin and yang, lunar and solar, Ida and Pingala. There are a lot of ways to name them, and they have been named in almost every culture since most of our earliest records of society. And we want to distinguish them from men and women, and most importantly, from the qualities that are assigned and attributed and almost expected from men and women. And when we began to explore this, we realized that this conversation flows really heavily and associates with the healing of our wounds and healing in general. So many of our wounds are associated or directly impacted by those societal expectations and ways that we were raised to associate and interact with the feminine and masculine. So we then dive deeply into what it means to heal, the benefits of healing for you and others around you, some ways to start and go through the cycles of healing, and then we tackle some of the common resistances and ways to get past them as well. I found this episode healing to even just produce, and I am so excited to bring these thoughts and discussions your way. And I could not have done it without the brilliant mind and well-spoken words of the one Mr. Warren Hooley. He is a workshop facilitator of nonviolent communication, among with other topics, and he has done a lot of healing in the areas of the masculine and the feminine and speaks very eloquently of his process. If you recognize his voice, it may be because he was also featured on the nonviolent communication episode. All right, so without further ado, let's get into it.
Hello, and welcome. Welcome to this late night podcasting episode on the masculine and the feminine. Welcome. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well.
Great.
Doing well.
So, this episode is all about the masculine and the feminine. And so we got to start with the definitions. We got to start with defining these types of energies, because I think a lot of us are, it's our society, right? Our society has a very distinct view on what's masculine, what's feminine, what's a man, what's a woman. And all these terms have gotten very mixed up with one another. And right, we've been taught this. This is literally like the fabric of what we've been taught. Blue is masculine, or blue is male, and pink is female, like since the moment we're born, right? We're taught these things. And so how do we go about unlearning this? And how do we go about like changing our perception around what these things mean to us?
Yeah. And it's tricky. I like to always acknowledge the fact that we've been using, at least here in the Western world, North America is where we're based, Canada, that we've been using the word masculine and feminine along with male and female, or man and woman, interchangeably for a long period of time. So it's very normal to feel like those are all just synonyms. Those all could be interchangeably used. But that's something I want to acknowledge, is that there's a lot of bodies of work and like spiritual practices that have existed in other places of the world for thousands of years that have used the concepts like masculine and feminine. They don't always use those words. It could be yin and yang, Shakti, Shiva. There's more.
Ida, Pingala, the sun and the moon energies. Sun being the masculine, moon being the feminine. Yeah.
And so all of those cultures held it very differently. It wasn't interwoven with gender and biological sex. So, but as we are trying to navigate those terminologies like masculine and feminine, it's going to be really tricky to not keep thinking, oh, when you said that's masculine, that you're saying that all men are like this. Mm-hmm. And that's something that does take time to kind of detangle. And I've heard some people say like, oh, I wish they would just use different words because it would make it easier to not have to do that detangling process and just have a new association to something new.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's a place inside me that disagrees with the word feminism for the same reason that I think that it really misconstrues the meaning of it, because we think so much about femininity, female, all that aspect, instead of just saying what we're trying to get is equality. And that, like, that's what I see it as. But I feel like it was named in a way that's a real detriment to what it's trying to accomplish. So in the same way, yeah, like we hear feminine and we automatically, are brought back to those childhood teachers, like even like your parents, right, who like taught you through no fault of their own, this is a societal and cultural thing, that this is what it means to be feminine, this is what it means to be masculine.
And I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge up front, is that every one of us has had a relationship to those gender boxes that the world has imposed for a long period of time. And there's a lot of interesting history there that I'm not going to go into, around when capitalism kind of intersected with the gender boxes and how that was utilized to make money. And so there's some interesting stuff you can research and learn about yourself. But
the pink tax.
Yeah, things of this nature. But for me, what's important is that I think most people can agree that a restrictive box of who you're supposed to be based on the biological sex you're born with has a lot of negative costs to it. It really impacts our lives in so many ways. We feel restricted. We can't just actually be who we really are. And on the vice versa side of that is sometimes that, for me, the more I become trauma informed, the more I see that if I get wounded, my wounds start to be connected to certain stereotypical box. Let's say, like for me, being born a man, I can start to reject everything that even remotely relates to that box. So I could reject all masculinity, all masculine traits. And I've done that to some degree. I've shut down certain parts of myself, and that had a massive detriment on my life that I didn't realize. Like, I didn't want to be associated with so many of the men that I personally seen in my life, but also the experiences that women had told me growing up. So much wounding has come at the hands of men. And so I would reject those parts of me, thinking I didn't want to be like them. But what I didn't realize is that I was also rejecting it's like I was throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I was getting rid of the whole thing. And then I became very passive, and I was very kind and loving, which was great, but I didn't actually develop my ability to be assertive and be confident, and some of these other parts of me I also rejected. So yeah, it's important to understand that.
What it's bringing up for me is when you said like, oh, I'm not like that and I don't want to be that way. Like, there's this saying that apparently in heterosexual dating spaces, I've heard of a male friend of mine saying that a lot of women will use the phrase, oh, but I'm not like other girls. And that's kind of a terrifying statement to like hear from so many people, because it's like we're all trying to reject the stereotype that we think that men are putting on us being heterosexual women, in this case, speaking from, well, yes, we'll put my heterosexual hat on for that. But yeah, that like all of us have this concept of what it means to be a woman. In this case, it is like based on more on gender than energies, I think, that we want to reject, that we want to not be like, that we want to not have other people see us that way, because like we're associating our femininity with these negative things, I think, in that same sort of vein.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, I mean, I think for any of us, if that restrictive box was imposed on us in any way, we can start reject entire things and anything associated with it, which can have a detriment on your life, because you might be really rejecting something that could truly give incredible gifts to you and actually be a part of your authentic nature. And so this is something that I think about a lot, is like, And I think it's a really hard pill to swallow, but how much do we live our lives and build our beliefs and choose strategies based on our wounding?
Mm-hmm.
And how much do we even know who we really are until we've done at least some of that core wound healing? And I can see this so true for myself and so many people that I know, is that the more I worked on my abandonment mood, for example, I built an entire worldview and idea of what the world was. And the danger of that is once I build that idea, my confirmation bias can easily kick into play. And I just look for other people who agree with me. And this is what we're seeing with the polarity of the world right now. And I could really easily get locked into thinking that's who I am and this is how the world is. And when I started to really go into that mother wound and heal my wound with my mother, how much more, when I was finally from a healed place and my lens wasn't being distorted by my own wounding, I started to really fundamentally see women differently, see relationships differently, the world differently in general. And then I started to discover who I really was.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate reality, is a ton of us have been through a lot of wounding. Even if it's not as dramatic as a mom leaving when you're a little kid, it can be a lot more subtle than that.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
It's not the event, right? That's what they say about the trauma. It's like how you respond to the event, right? So there's no being like, you're not weaker or stronger if some event affected you more or affected you less. Like it's the impact that it has on your nervous system and on your body.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, I think what you're speaking to is like that a lot of us have core wounds surrounding the masculine and the feminine and those energies, and what we've been taught that it means to be one or the other, and what we've been taught that we have to be because we were born with certain parts. But yeah, so we've danced around this whole thing, but what we really want to speak to is like how we can harness those masculine and feminine energies, and what it means to have those in balance, because we all have those in ourselves, right? Like it's not one or the other. And somebody who seems very grounded and who seems to like, it's often because they really understand their balance. Not that every like 50-50 balance is not what we're aiming for. It's understanding what the natural balance is within each of us, I think. And that's when we find like compatibility with others. Like I see, attracting your opposite, like, oh, opposites attract, that, you're attracting somebody who has that exact opposite balance. Like if I feel like I have, in general, on average, 60, like I'm on the spectrum, we're all on a spectrum, right? It goes from, 0 to 100 on both sides. And if I say that I'm, a 60, on an average day, 60% femininity and 40% masculinity, then I like finding that exact equal and opposite, I find is what, like that energy just meshes perfectly.
Yeah, which would a lot of times, is referred to as polarity of some kind, like the polar, the polarized caps, for example, or a polar charge that goes into your wall, like the positive and negative charge that creates electricity and allows electricity, that you can feel between another human being or a place or really anything. And I think this is where we get stuck as a larger society, because we're afraid to define things because of the trauma that's so interwoven. So we're afraid to say, like, these are masculine qualities, these are feminine qualities. Really commonly, as I start to say, let's say, for example, I say a masculine quality is like being assertive, like being connected to your truth, speaking your truth. I've had many people say back to me, like, well, a woman can be confident too. And that's a clear misunderstanding. Because when I say masculine energy, it's the energy that's in everything, like literally everything. It's in the trees. It's in the stars. Yang.
It's the sun. It's
in human beings.
And human beings.
It's in you. So it's in everyone. It's that quality inside of you. And the other issue that I've seen is that because of the way we've been conditioned, sometimes when I start to name the masculine qualities and the feminine qualities, people will have a knee-jerk reaction to be like, oh, well, you're making it sound like the masculine's better. And I'm like, well, what is that rooted in? Is that because you're not valuing those feminine things as much? I heard it.
Yeah. And our society has like almost purposely swept those qualities under the rug and taught us that they're not as valued. Absolutely.
I really think, to me, that this is the heart of it. I've heard a woman recently say, like, she would love to see that fifth wave feminism was a wave where we really honored the feminine aspect, the feminine qualities, the traits in all things, and that extends to Mother Earth. That extends to empathy and care.
I think that's coming, though, isn't that? Like, that is fifth wave feminism.
Because, like, if you think of equality of the genders, like, are we going to create a world where women need to be more masculine in order to create equality? Or can we create a world where a woman can be whoever she wants to be, whether, even if that is really feminine, and still get paid just as much in that feminine role? Like, it shows where's our value. Are we valuing the feminine traits and how that shows up in all aspects of society? Like, money's one way of showing value, right? It's not the only way, but recognition, appreciation. There's a lot of ways we can show that, oh, we value this thing. And that's what I would love to see, is that. And like, you can just, it's so blatantly obvious to me. Like, if you look at productivity as an example, it's such like the all-time greatest value right now in our society. And it's like, we're driving it so hard.
I think that's shifting, though.
I do think
subtly, but it's shifting.
I think so too. But like, self-care, for an example, would be something that's probably on one of the things that could be on the other side of productivity. And I truly think real happiness and fulfillment comes from when those are in balance. Because you can go too far either way. You can become too much into self-care, and you lose that sense of productivity, that sense of like accomplishing something.
And you can go too far into your flow, and then all of a sudden, you don't get anything done. And I think there's a huge, like, the squishing and the like, really like teaching us all in our current day society that these feminine qualities are negative is part of why the world's on fire.
Yeah.
Right? Because nurture is inherently a feminine quality, and like earth energy has often been spoken of as being very like, Mother Gaia, like the spirit of the earth is inherently more on the feminine spectrum, I would say, right? Because I'm sure that that's balanced as well. But that, and I've heard it said too, if women ran the world, we wouldn't have destroyed it. And that's a whole other, like, that's a bold statement, I know. And that's not taking into account a whole bunch of nuances.
Yeah.
But yeah, that there's that like lack of nurture and a lack of a lot of feminine qualities because we were told that they were negative.
Yeah. I think the world I'd love to see is that every human, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you identify as, you can look at all of these traits, whether you want to list them and label them as masculine and feminine or not, you see all of them and you're willing to do the work to really learn how to embody them. And you find the balance. There's no block to any of them, right? You have a capability to be fluidly switching between all of them. Like, more so often in men's cases, being vulnerable is going to be a lot harder. Because how we're conditioned. Like, I was bullied. I was made fun of every time I was vulnerable growing up.
You know what? I would challenge you on that, though, because there's a reason why there's all these like business development for women specifically out there, like books and everything, courses, because like, as much as it's like difficult for like a man who was raised in that like uber masculine way in today's society, it's the same on the other side of the spectrum. Like, a woman, it's really hard for us to get to a certain level of assertiveness, or at least I'm going to speak from my own experience. Sorry, I don't want to lump us all in together, but like, I have experienced and I have seen a lot of other women who've been raised with that like feminine energy, that it's really hard to step into certain places, especially in the workplace, and like really hold your own power true. So I've seen like men have the same level of like confidence and assertiveness and like drive and all these like typically masculine qualities that I've worked years to develop. I have worked years just to be able to sit in the same room, right? And they're just there, and they just like kind of shrug their shoulders and they go, yeah, this is normal, right? So I stepped into that, but it just like, I can see that it's both sides. It's so much both sides. Those qualities that you were taught wasn't for you.
Yeah, I think everything you said, I completely agree with that. I don't think that was a challenge at all.
No,
That was a yes and to me.
Yes.
But like, because the way that we're raised, all of us will experience, and this is very general, but some of us will experience certain levels of oppression, quote unquote oppression. Like for men, generally speaking, we tend to be encouraged into our confidence more so, but less so into vulnerability, and the vice versa can be true for most women. There'll always be exceptions, right? Who are your parents? So many dynamics at play, and then there'll be certain levels of ways that we kind of inherit privilege. Like I've had a lot of relationships with, heterosexual female women where they just really want me to be vulnerable, and they don't understand why I'm not just being vulnerable. And I'm like, do you realize how I was raised? Like, this is really hard for me. Like, I've had to work really freaking hard to be able to get to the capacity to let myself be really vulnerable, be held. And there's tons of discourses out there on like social media now that if you ever show your vulnerability to your woman, she'll think you're completely emasculated. So there's a lot of messaging we can receive in different forms that's like, do not be vulnerable. And don't get me wrong, like, I think there's places to be vulnerable in my relationships, and there's times where like I also need to take my stuff and I need to go other places, whether it's the counseling office or it's a ceremonial place or it's a men's group. Like there's other places I also can work on my stuff. But the idea that like you can never be vulnerable, I think is dangerous.
You should never say never. And never say always, right? Like, and those terms, this is a whole different concept, but like those terms often have almost the same knee-jerk, like really triggering reaction to people. Like if you tell them never this or always this, like that's just not true. Like the world isn't black and white. It's all shades of gray, and it's all a spectrum.
I think one of the most tricky things to unlearn is like stereotypical thinking. It's so easy to start putting everything in categories. I think one of the fundamental needs it meets as a human is some form of safety or security. Because if you got everyone figured out, you got them all in their little boxes, you think you have the world understood. But and the more I've grown up, the more I've learned, my 37 years, it's like learning to embrace complexity and nuance and the discomfort that comes with that. But I don't have it figured out. And it does challenge my security and safety sometimes, But I want to see human beings learn the skills so that we can become more resilient and we're more capable. Like here's an interesting example. Like I brought up Andrew Tate in one of my workshops recently, and a woman spoke up and was just like really mad. Understandably, I get it. And I completely understand that. And what I said to her is like, look, if I were to go to a group of teenage boys and just get mad at them for watching Andrew Tate, what's probably going to happen? They're going to just watch it behind my back, basically. Very because they're craving masculine role models. And unfortunately, they're looking for someone that's definitely not the best. There's way better examples out there. But with lack of choice, they're defaulting to something that's really easy to find. So what I offered back was like, well, what if I sat down with them and I watched Andrew Tate with them and I showed them, here's what it looks like to critically think. Here's what it looks like to actually navigate. What's the strengths that he has? Let's do some research. Let's find out his structure, like his financial structure model, and like, where is his level of integrity? Like, because it's really easy to look at the surface of him and be like, oh yeah, man, he's got a Bugatti and he hooks up with all these hot women. It's really easy to look at that surface and be like, that's what I want, especially as a young man.
Yes.
But if I can teach them the skills and I can start to trust that they're going to be able to look at any content and actually be able to unpack it and look at it from different angles, that's what actually gives me a sense of security. Instead of just trying to be like, I'm going to cancel Andrew Tate, or I'm going to make sure that they're never exposed to them. I really think that that's just pushing it into the darkness. It's not actually creating the change we want.
You can't just pretend something doesn't exist. You can't just push it under. We can't just say, oh, let's remove the concept of masculine and feminine energies. They're there. They exist. And they're this, and watching history unfold and watching it be present in every stage of human existence means that these are archetypes that have existed through time. Like, it has always fascinated me when there's stories like from way before we had a global society, from way, way before, when it's like these two cultures existed completely separate from one another. They had no cross-pollination. These people did not know each other, and yet they have the stories that tell the same thing. And they're right, and there's the same lessons and the same dynamics that you find. And I find that so fascinating, because that means it's human nature. That's so deep within us. Like, that wasn't taught. That was part of our bone structure when we were born, right? So it's that ingrained within all of us. It is, but it's the way we've been taught to view it. And so, yeah, like we can't just say no. We can't just say, let's just eliminate this. And let's just, like, I think there is value though in, like, if saying the word feminine and masculine really attaches too much to man or woman in your brain, then there is, I think, a lot of value in using different terms, at least for a while, to really kind of categorize that. Because, yeah, the boxes don't just disappear. You can define them differently, and you can use them differently, but they'll still be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's maybe circling back a little bit, but my deepest desire in my lifetime is to see a world where the intention is to build communities where each person can thrive, like, to their own definition.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest hurdles of that being accomplished is healing wounds. This is what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in a world filled of so many ways to bypass it and ignore it and not go into it, not go into that really vulnerable place. And I think that's the thing. Like, it really is vulnerable. It really is, like, you're regressing a lot of times in, say, a therapeutic counseling scenario where you're regressing into being that little kid again.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a vulnerable place. You really need to trust that person to hold you and be there with care. And I think a lot of people, whether they're consciously aware or unconscious, they're avoiding it to some degree. They don't. And sometimes for me, what it took was, like, I had to truly recognize that the benefit of that was so much greater than the fear of the vulnerability, or even the detriment. The cost of my life was even worse than the fear of the vulnerability. Mm-hmm. Both were true. And I had to actually dig and look at it and think about it and reflect on it and I go through waves. I'll be honest with you. It's not like I'm like, oh yeah, I go to hardcore healing sessions every single week for the past. That's not true. I go through waves of where I need a break, and I can't be doing the intense stuff. I just got to, like, have fun, be more relaxed and chill, and, binge Netflix. Like, I think that's okay. Like, I think we're cyclical. We're kind of cyclical as beings, and we'll go through phases of maybe more intensity and uprooting and healing. And we go phases where it's more relaxed and fun, and, that's fine. But,
and you feel like you're kind of complete for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's what I think the thing that I would encourage everyone is, like, find different ways of styles of healing that work for you, and don't ever stop. Like, keep searching and keep trying new things. And because if we're not doing that, then a decent percentage of our lives is being completely formed by our own wounding.
So the word healing and the word, like, oh, I'm doing the work, is become greenwashed, for lack of a better word around it.
I don't know.
Heel wash, right? Like, it's there, and it's just thrown out, and it's one of those terms like, oh, this was my journey, or this is, authentic. And, like, it just, like, it's one of those words, it's used so much now. Mm-hmm. And, like, even sometimes I would get triggered on it. Right. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, this person just can't stop talking about their goddamn healing journey. Like, I'm sorry, there's so many reels all over Instagram about this topic. Like, oh my God. And so, to anyone who's now thinking that, listening to this, going like, okay, but where do I start? Or, like, it's kind of overwhelming, right? Like, the idea of being like, okay, just heal for your entire life is really overwhelming. But, like, I do agree there is that cycle, and there's, like, because I've had moments where I go, oh, I'm good. Like, I'm good. I don't really want to grow. And then I've had moments where it's like the most important thing for me to grow past this, because you get up to a certain point, you go, holy shit, I've now found this thing that's stopping me from living the life that I want to live and having the relationships that I want to have. And I need to push past it. And then you do the healing work. But that's such a broad term. So how can we break that down a little bit? And how can we like help, like where to start and how to kind of hold someone in the fact that like it's a process, everything's a process. And that can be really overwhelming. So how do we underwhelm that?
Yeah. Or just whelm.
Yes, whelm. Natural event. Let's not underwhelm.
Yeah. Not over, not under. Just whelm.
Just be whelmed. Yes. But yeah, like that because that took me a long time to get to a place where I recognized, oh, it's a process. Oh, this is going to be just a continuous thing, and not to like run full, because I have this tendency of like, I see my goal and I'm like, oh my God, okay, I'm going to run full tilt towards it. And then you burn yourself out. And then you might not get to that goal. And we see that happening a lot where like somebody gets this idea in their head that, yeah, this is where I'm going and I need to be this and do this. And they get focused on this like end result of what they're going to be. When I have X, I'm going to have Y. But, you know, instead of being able to sit with the person you are right now today and just be happy that this is where you are, because it's never going to stop. You're never going to stop changing. And it's the process is never going to end. Process is called life. When that process is done, you're dead. Like it's
Sometimes I like to see it. I love the metaphor of the spiral, but sometimes I think of it as two spirals inside each other. One spiral is spiraling upwards and one spiral is spiraling down. And so the spiral up kind of represents, you know, sometimes a spiral can feel like maybe you're not really progressing. It's maybe a little bit more of a circle, you know? But the spiral up is more about like growth, like you're learning new things, you're taking bigger risks. I love to talk about like finding your learning edge in life.
Ooh, yeah.
And balancing how much you're in your comfort zone, which is super important. That's how you rest, digest, you heal. But making sure that you are consistently to some degree stepping outside that comfort zone and growing. I think it's absolutely crucial. And healing will come with that. Like, for example, and probably my easiest obvious example is more like creative expression. Like me slowly, you know, doing beatboxing was probably the first one that really came to me as a young man. And then it's a little bit of theater, a little bit of visual art, you know, these kinds of things. By taking that greater risk and putting myself out there and overcoming that fear, it did heal parts of me. Also, like, you know, building self-beliefs about who I am, it'll help strengthen your confidence and things of that nature. So that's kind of, there's probably more I could say about that, but that generally speaking, that's the spiral up. Whereas the spiral down is more like, it's more inside, like going into the childhood wounds, replaying those things, being held emotionally in them, looking at the beliefs that you formed growing up, or it can be a lot of different things that was formed in childhood. Like it could even just be like the value systems that now we hold, or a sense of morality of what's good, bad, right, and wrong. Like going back and maybe doing some unlearning, or at the very minimum, really looking at like, why do I think this way?
There's this process. And it's so much more involved than this, but a very small piece of the process is like, you know, if you feel yourself and start to notice a belief that you go, oh, wow, why do I have that belief? Like does that actually serve me? And you start realizing that this belief doesn't serve you. And let's take an example like, I can't be an entrepreneur. Let's say that that's a belief that you have, and there's probably there's many layers to that, but let's say that there's that belief, and you can kind of close your eyes and check in with your body, do like a body scan, try to like, you know, you can do a couple deep breaths to like really sink into like your body instead of your mind, and stay with that feeling of, I can't be an entrepreneur. And there's a good chance that there's a place within your body that emotion exists. That there's somewhere that it's sitting and it's very heavy, and like maybe you'll find like some heaviness on your chest, and you'll go, okay, that's telling me that there's this belief that I can't be an entrepreneur. And again, this is like a small piece of a larger process, and there's like, you know, you could go into somatic experiencing and that sort of like therapy to help with this kind of exploration. But you can check in and you can look at like, you can kind of check in, how old does that part of me think I am? right? And how long have I thought that? And often it's really young, like really, really young, and something imprinted. Sometimes it imprints before you even can remember. Something's imprinted from your mother's touch. You know, they talk about the fact that, you know, if a baby isn't held skin to skin with another human being within the first, I think it's days after they're born, if they're not held that way, that seriously impacts the rest of their lives. And that's now a core wound that they have to heal from later on in life if they realize, like, yeah, it's crazy. And so, yeah, just like checking in on like, how old does this part of me think I am? And then, yeah, there's a process where you can go through and kind of like let that piece of you meet you now and like hold it and say like, hi, it's okay. I'm here. Like, I'm like this part of you that you think you're protecting. Cause it's something saying like, for example, like going back to the example, it like, I can't be an entrepreneur. It's protecting you. Almost always it is protecting you from stepping out and like, you know, you can't be an entrepreneur because that's not safe. And then you can go into, yeah, anyways, sorry, that's going way too deep into it. But like, but then you end up uncovering stuff like, oh, my parents taught me that it wasn't safe to be an entrepreneur, that I needed a stable 9-to-5 job to feel safe. And that's ultimately what we all want, right? Love, safety, and belonging.
I do appreciate you bringing up like the somatic part. I do think that's really important. Like for myself, being half Indigenous, half Ukrainian and English, learning some of the Indigenous ways of thinking from my own Okanagan culture, like a medicine wheel is a really common example. Like how much the spiritual or energetic, the mind, the body, and the heart, all four of those quadrants being equally important. Like really seen as all four of those are important. Right now we're living in a world where like it really is mind dominant. You know, the way we really put value is like in a style of education that's very mind oriented, memorizing, regurgitating. So the body's been neglected in some ways. I mean, there's still some ways that you can still achieve, like having a really good looking body, for example. So there's some ways that shows up, but being in tune with your body, like feeling the body sensations, learning to listen to it, be like, oh, you know what? I am feeling some tension in my shoulders. Ooh, my body's trying to tell me something. Maybe I'm feeling stressed. Maybe I'm feeling worried. Oh, maybe I have a need for relaxation right now, or maybe I just need to talk to someone and like name it and be met with care or understanding, you know, like that type of self-connection is just not taught in any school systems. Like we live in the Western world really, really focuses on the head. And so I'm trying to imagine myself like how much resistance there is to healing. Because we also live in a world where you really don't have to do it. You could live the rest of your life, never go to your wounds, still live a relatively decent life. I personally believe like you'll never truly feel fulfilled. You know, you're robbing yourself of what you're truly capable of.
Absolutely.
Like the greatest highs, the deepest depths. You can live a kind of a general median, like decent life. And we live in like the most prosperous times ever in history. Like there's just literally anything's possible. And I do think that the capitalism system will encourage you to just have hits of pleasure, to get by having hits of pleasure, you know, with your phone, with games, with movies, with pornography, with anything we consume, with tasty food, you know, just like you can have all these little hits of pleasure and that can kind of get you by. But that's not what I think true happiness is. Like that deep, fulfilling glow inside of you that comes from challenge, that comes from overcoming things, healing parts of yourself, becoming more the real you, not with the conditioning and the wounding. Like that is, I think, the most fulfilling path you could possibly take. And we probably need some help to be able to start that journey, continue that journey. You know, I don't want to stand here and claim that that's easy. It's going to, and some people it's going to be harder.
It's so hard. It is so much harder said than done. And like there's moments where you're working on it and you just go, why did I choose to do this? Why I was perfectly fine before, but I find that it's like you have moments where you're woken up and it's not everything all at once, and you're never going to be woken up until you're ready. I truly believe that like you're never given more than you can handle, and you're never woken up to a certain aspect until you are ready to handle it. Like you will stay asleep. And and then some people stay asleep, and that's okay. And they're, yeah, like you said, going to live a pretty good life. But it's that moment of like, there's times when you're woken up and then I see people close their eyes again, right? It's like they wake up and they peek out and they go, oh, no, that's scary. And the truth is, it is fucking scary. And it's so hard sometimes. But like, I also see, like, I see the world, like not the world, but your happiness and your emotions and your capacity for certain experiences in life as a sine wave. And sine wave just being, you know, like an up and down. And like equal and opposite, but that's my calculus brain coming out, wanting to call it a sine wave. And that like your capacity for joy is going to be equal and opposite and mirrored for your capacity for sadness, right? It's like the idea that, you know, oh, I don't want to love so deeply because then I'm going to hurt so deeply. Well, yeah, that's the cost. And that's what happens. Everything exists in those polar opposites, just like masculine and feminine. You can't have one without the other. And yes, to love that deeply, to open yourself up that deeply, to be that vulnerable to that love, you risk that much pain. And I've always considered myself very, very fortunate that I accepted that very young. And I've always known that that's the price. And I've always been willing to pay it. Because yeah, you don't get the highest highs without the lowest lows. And some people just kind of exist in that middle, right? They kind of go a little bit up and a little bit down, right? And they're just kind of staying near that set point, and that's okay. But you don't experience that depth of pleasure without going to the depth of your shadows.
And one of my dear mentors, Sarah Payton, she'll always say, like, yeah, the waves of emotion will never stop. Those tides will exist for the rest of your life, but you can learn how to ride those waves with grace instead of it just like sucking you under and you flipping and getting tossed, and you know, and that sometimes can happen. And like, then you're afraid to take risks anymore because you're stuck in this, you're in the depths, and you're, you know, and then maybe you finally get to shore and you're like, oh my God, that was horrible. I'm never doing that again, you know? So it's recognizing like, okay, what fundamental skills do I need to learn so that I can actually manage the ups and downs of life and the challenges that come my way? And, you know, things like really base things like a level of self-presence, like being able to stay with yourself. Mindfulness is a really common term for that. Like being able to just be with, and whether it's neutral holding of yourself, this is what meditation is all based on, or a warm holding, like a sense of warmth to yourself, can be hard to develop if you didn't receive that growing up. But these things are skills that can be built and can be fortified over time. Or maybe it's perspective. You have a really good ability to like see it from a more optimistic perspective. That can sometimes help your nervous system too. Breathing techniques, like these fundamental things slowly build your confidence that, yeah, even when the struggles come, like I can make it through them. And it's you know, it's a process. It takes time. You slow as your capacity grows, you can take a little bit more risks, you know. I definitely still, even after doing this for like 12 years very intensively, there's still risks that I'm terrified of, and there's still things that I'm like, oh, like I can still get stuck in this place of fear and like just playing it safe. But the irony for me is when I do that, I start to feel depressed. For me, that's what depression is when I'm not living and I'm not taking those, even if they're tiny risks, you know, even if it's not just like walking out and saying good morning to people as I'm walking down the street, like that's a risk. Yeah. And those are the things that truly fill me up.
Yeah. I resonate with that quite heavily because I reached a point where I realized I wasn't growing. I realized I wasn't learning. Actually, yeah, it was the learning and the growing tied together. And I hadn't, because I hadn't, this, it's totally reasonable because I had gone through all of my schooling, and then I'd gone through a time of intense travel and just exploring the world. And then I kind of settled into quote unquote adult life, you know, post studies. And yeah, and then I just kind of kept doing what I knew how to do. And then, yeah, within a year, I got into this like spiral of like, what is happening? Why am I so unhappy with these things? And it was, I had stopped learning. I forgot how much I loved learning, because that was just what I was forced to do my whole life. So it took me not doing it to go, oh, I need to be constantly finding my edges and constantly finding where I can, keep growing.
And the great thing is, as an adult, we have the autonomy to be able to choose what we want to learn instead of being in the school system, which is a little trickier.
Yes.
So you can now pick the things that really make you come alive,
Mm-hmm.
I do want to part of me still wants to keep acknowledging why people may not have resistance to the healing journey. I think some of them are really legitimate. The two that really come to my mind is, one is, I've heard a lot of people say this fear of, if they open, it's like Pandora's box. Like if they open it, they don't know what's going to happen. And for some people, I've seen it happen where their entire life gets turned upside down, where they're they can't work their job for 6 months. They have to take a sabbatical. That can happen if there's a lot there that you've been pushing down for a lot of period of time. And there might need to be some logical decisions around that. Maybe you need to have a good savings before you decide to go down there, so you have that financial stability.
I mean, that can very quickly become an excuse, but
it could.
Yes,
as long as it's you have that goal with the genuine date in mind.
Yes,
you're actually going to do it.
And I think the solution, maybe we can go through the resistance and then maybe possible solutions at the same time. So the solution to that being take small bites, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you do know that there's this huge underbelly that's roaring to come out, and you can kind of feel it and you have that resistance to it, just set yourself up with a lot of health practitioners, right? Therapists, and I would also really suggest not just the mental therapists. There's a better term for that, but there's we've mentioned somatic being body, and it's this body experiencing, and there's so much wisdom that's stored in the body, and there's so much memory and stuff that's stored within the body. Anyway, so you can go look up somatic experiencing, but there's a whole different type of therapy that doesn't allow you to think your way through a problem or talk your way through a problem. It's really what's left in your body right now, because that's the leftover of trauma and the leftover of what needs to be healed.
I think this connects to another resistance for me, which is people have tried something that's, whether it's similar or has actually gone to a counselor, had a bad experience, and now is counseling's not for me. I've heard literally hundreds of people tell me that.
Wow. And
I really try to be hey, I just really want you to imagine going to meet up with a friend and then it didn't go well. Would you be friendship's not for me? No, I don't think you would. You would find someone you're compatible with.
Yeah.
And so I really, really believe therapy is very similar. Unfortunately, I've met people who have their masters in counseling, and they're still, in my opinion, not very good at being a counselor. And what defines good is, I think the body is such an incredibly important part of it. The emotions are such an incredible part. It's less about the psychoanalysis and less about diagnosing you as this is who you are and this is what you have. That's such a small percentage of it.
Absolutely.
And so if you ever get a therapist or a counselor or whoever it is, and that's all they're staying on, try something different. I would recommend try 10 different people with 10 different therapy styles, before you even start to formulate whether this works for you or not. And don't get me wrong, therapy isn't the only way. There are things like ceremonies that exist, or for me, I go to men's groups that can help.
There's some pretty potent psychoactive drug experiences as well that can really help purge a lot of stuff from your system.
Yep, and that can be combined with therapy as well. It's becoming very popularized. I think it's phenomenal.
It is phenomenal.
And I think the other thing that ties me back to is don't be afraid to keep going to workshops where you can keep developing those primary skills I mentioned earlier. And one of them is asking for help. It might be the greatest skill a human being can learn. I think about this a lot.
Other than to love.
Okay.
I would say
that's a sign of love, is being maybe a self of love, is being able to ask for help.
Well, okay. I'm sorry, but my mind just shot out to Moulin Rouge, and the greatest thing you'll ever learn is to be loved, and how to love and be loved in return.
Mm-hmm. I think it is an extension of love, is asking for help.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's all interconnected.
Yeah. And for me, I think in my journey of asking for help, sometimes I can muster up the energy to do it once, but then if it doesn't work out, I'll immediately just regress and be I knew it. that doesn't work. And I was in such a vulnerable place and it didn't work out for me. And like, that's been one of my hardest things to ever learn is like, even if it fails the first time, how do I make an adjustment and ask for help again? Maybe the hardest thing I've ever had to learn. I still go through periods of time where I fall back into that. Really, really, really challenging for me.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not for everybody. For me, it has been. So yeah, just coming back to that, like keep building those fundamental skill sets and capacities so that you can be present with your emotions and you're going to be able to heal more effectively and live your life more as who you fully are. And and the last one I wanted to say was another one that I find tricky is that if your whole family in the primary environment that you're in, the people you're around, and none of them are wanting to do healing, unconsciously, for the sake of belonging and for the sake of ease, you might unconsciously be choosing not to go down that path. Maybe a part of you wants to, but it might cause friction. What unfortunate reality is that sometimes when we start to learn new things and start to better ourselves, the people around us can it almost can bring up their shame to the surface, or it can make them uncomfortable and they can start challenging us or pushing back, or there's a whole multitude of ways that they can respond that don't feel supportive. And that could be a really powerful deterrent.
Well, so I want to name that belonging is so much more important than I think modern society leads us to believe. And there's so much like, oh yeah, be independent and like you can strike away from the pack. But we are fundamentally wired as human beings that not belonging means death. Because way back when in the pack, like you had to stay in that pack. And if you got ostracized, if you were the weird one, if people decided that you didn't belong here anymore, you would get left out to die in the desert or the forest or wherever your tribe lived. Like you would, like not belonging and being rejected by your peers and your family and your friends meant death. And that is still within us. That is within our primal brains. And so we fight it. And then that is why we look at, the common social fabric and we want to fit into it. And then like, I think we have that desire to like step into our edge, which means that we can put like one toe out and kind of play with the idea of being a little more individualized, but yet still make sure that you're pretty much going along with it. And so it is an edge and it is a skill to be able to step out and go, this is okay. And I'm okay. And to start resourcing your safety and that sense of belonging into yourself, right? That, and find someone else and some other people, other community to belong to. And this is kind of where chosen family steps in as well.
I agree.
But yeah, that there's a lot of, I've started noticing that a lot as I keep growing and keep changing and keep really stepping more into myself and away from what I was taught and how I was brought up, it really reaches into this terrifying place where I feel like I might get rejected by my family. And then that opens up a whole new set, and there's so many like not funny, but the things that say like, like you think you've done all this healing and then go back to see your family.
Absolutely.
And then you just get like, you feel like you undo so much work, but that is part of the work.
Yeah. And to be fair, like what it's going to mean is your family's like the hardest, likely, not for everybody, but to me, it comes down to the window of tolerance concept that Dan Siegel coined. And it's like, if you have a bunch of tiny little unresolved triggers, the more you have with someone in your history, the smaller your window of tolerance is for that person. So like siblings are great example. As parents are obvious examples of this. Yeah. Anyone you grew up with over time, like you were young, you triggered each other all the time. You did not repair it whatsoever, understandably. Same with our parents. And so, yeah, like I can be around my sister and she can make one sound like, and I'll be like, what was that about? Like immediate trigger. But if a stranger did the same thing, I wouldn't even bat an eyelash. So yeah, understanding that are usually the people we grew up with the most, it's going to be the hardest challenge. It's going to be the 10 out of 10 difficulty. Like, so I don't recommend going there right away. Like start with strangers, start with roommates. Like this is a great place to start with lesser connections and slowly work your way up to that point.
Or maybe not lesser connections, but yeah, ones that aren't as ingrained into your nervous system and weren't with you.
That'll still come up. Like I'll meet someone that they have one quality of my sister, and like that'll still come up. But now it's one thing to work on instead of 17 at the same time. Right?
Yeah, my sister is probably, sorry, I love you, sis, but you are the most triggering person in my life, most likely, because
that's normal.
It's normal. Yeah, and start discovering that. So I'm wondering if we can, I loved the tangent we got on, and I loved the flow, and I just wanted to see where that took us. And I'm wondering if within this conversation, we can tie back into the masculine and feminine energies. And I think we can, but I want to challenge us right now to link that back up, and where, like, we talked about trying to like heal. We talked a lot about healing, but like, where can that healing intersect with our perceptions of the masculine and feminine?
Yeah. Well, like what I can say broadly initially is that one thing that I'm always trying to do is, as I'm ingesting anything, like if I'm listening to someone talk, I'm watching a video, I'm trying to notice within myself, like, is my perception getting skewed by my trigger? Like, am I really seeing this from a centered place? And that's like the thing that I've tried to cultivate for a lot of years now. Maybe like a simple example would even be like, I started to reject wearing certain types of clothes because I associated that with being when I was a teenage boy. But for me, that's still being driven by my wounding. It's driven by rejection and not wanting anything to do with it. For me, it's like I had to get to the point where like I fully understood the teenage version of myself and really held it with care, and why I became the way I became, which was like in a lot of ways unhealthy. And when I did that process over an extended period of time, like I was able to now, like, I could put on a pair of pants that I would wear at that age and not feel uncomfortable about it. It's like I could actually make a choice of whether I like this thing or not from a centered place, not from my wounding. If that makes sense. I'm trying to use an example, so for me, when I'm navigating masculine and feminine qualities, it's taking me a long time to get to that point. Like, I really think I've done my best anyways to see it from a centered place and see it as something that just encapsulates all things. I've really done a lot of work to remove gender from it, remove especially those gender boxes of stereotypes, and I'm doing my best to remove myself from that. So I guess that's what I'm inviting other people to look at it in a similar way. See that there actually is a lot of gifts when you can see the world through that lens. It's not to say that's your only lens, but when you can, man, does it help make sense of a lot of things. That's been my experience. It's helped me navigate relationships of all kinds, get a sense of like which parts of me needs to be developed better. Like for me, a big part was learning how to step into my confidence without being cocky and arrogant. How do I learn to be really centered and stable, and yet still be comfortable in my own skin, and be able to speak my truth, take up space, and have that balance of being aware of other people and noticing my impact on other people? Like, to me, life is so much about balance.
So much about balance. And I think this is the fundamental balance. And again, there's a reason why it runs through the middle of so many cultures for as long as human cultures have existed, that this is the fundamental balance, and that balance exists within all of us. And those energies exist within all of us. And learning how to express both and to connect with both and to allow them to come out when they're going to serve you best, right? Like having a moment where it's like, right now, I need to be in my masculine. Again, whatever word you want to use to define, like to really name that inside you and say, yeah, I need to, make sure I'm safe, make sure I have all my needs met in these ways. And there's people who say like the masculine can hold the feminine, and you can do that within yourself even. I find like, being in my masculine allows me to, get my work done, allow me to get my paycheck, get my food, get my shelter, like have all these like base root chakra needs met. And then from there, from this place of safety, because my masculine has now literally held me, like put the walls around my body, then I can go into my creative, then I can go into my flow, then like the feminine feels free and safe to come out because she's held. And you can see that happening even with like a partnership, that one person's like, okay, I'm gonna put all these, like, we're gonna make sure that we're on time and this and this, and like the rigidity of like the masculine structure of schedule, let's say. And then the feminine can come out, right? Like, okay, we've got these things in place. Now we can play. Now we can just let it all flow and just like go with it for the day. So yeah, just being able to know when to be in which one and know how much one supports the other, right? Like one can't exist without the other, just like within you. And so if you're finding that, you know, you're two on one side of the spectrum because you've been taught that way, it's a really good place to start looking at healing. You know, like, where is one not being supported by the other? Where is, when I'm too much, like, too fired up and too, like, maybe being aggressive, maybe, like, where does that other one kind of step in and support it?
Absolutely. And like within a relational dynamic, that can sometimes switch very, very fluidly. Like at one point, one person's maybe more in the masculine, holding, creating sense of security or protection, things of this nature. And the other person's more emotional and flow and creative. And then it could switch within 3 minutes later. Like there's no right or wrong, you know, generally speaking, usually someone's going to be a little bit more often on one side than the other, but there's certain people I've met that are like really in the middle, both of them. And it works for them because they fluidly switch all the time. And I think
because they're
great.
Equal and opposite. If they're both in the middle, then they're equal and opposite.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like I've always stood firm with my, like, I love and I'm often attracted to more feminine men, or men who have more of an in-touchness with their feminine energy, I should say, because I know that I have more masculine energy, or not more, but I know that I have a good, healthy amount that I recognize and I use, and I'm comfortable going into. And so like I think it's funny that that's been expressed through what I've been attracted to in the past, that, like, you know, I'll see a man who's very comfortable wearing a dress, you know, like this classic symbol of feminineness. And I know that, again, those things are kind of separate, but like one, you can go from one to the other and you can kind of like see how one indicates the other. And I've always been right? Like somebody who's that comfortable being in their feminine allows me to be in my masculine more, and it just balances out so beautifully.
Yeah, and like what you might be attracted to romantically could be different than what you're attracted to in like a colleague. Like for me, I facilitate workshops, and like I find that who I'm attracted to as a co-facilitator is very different than who I'm attracted to in a romantic partner, and like, and all the categories of my life, you know, roommates, you know, whatever it may be.
I mean, do you ever want the romantic partner to become a roommate? Because then that might need to intersect. But
yeah, maybe. So yeah, I guess, I don't know, maybe in closing, I think that's maybe what I'm really calling the world to healing. And yes, it relates to the so that we can explore the masculine, and unlocks this ability to look at the world through that lens. And I think it gives a lot of gifts, and it can create almost like a really great sense of global understanding of something, if we kind of all can see how that exists. Because right now, like, there's so much wounding intersecting with it that it's one of the primary driving forces of all the polarity. And instead we're seeing walls and division and anger. And it's like, that is massively affecting our politics, our communities, everything in the world we live in. So it's, the healing doesn't just allow you to like find out who you are. It's going to affect the health of our overall communities and whether we can actually navigate the problems we face on global levels, on larger systemic levels too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a level of acceptance. I think for my final piece, I think we could talk about this for literally hours. And I've had so much fun talking through this with you. But unfortunately, we do need to wrap up. So yeah, I would say there's a level of acceptance that goes into it. And I think acceptance is a concept that isn't discussed too often, but that is just so important to being able to like go from a place of acceptance. Like this is like, accept that this is the way it is, and then move forward with trying to work within it, and I think we fight against it a lot, and we grab onto terms and we go, oh no, but not that term, or not this term, or whatever else, and you're fighting a losing battle because you're fighting reality, and I think that can be the first step, is just saying, yes, that is. And even finding the pieces inside you that maybe you rejected. Like, did you reject your femininity? Did you reject your masculinity? Mm-hmm. And where can you just kind of reclaim that and say, yes, that's a part of me. I accept you. Mm-hmm. It goes a long way.
Yeah. Freeing all of our parts and like being able to go to any of those parts. With the capacity to go into all of them, accept them within us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for this lovely conversation, Warren. If anyone wants to get in touch with you or find out more about your work, where could they go?
I guess Facebook, Warren Hooley, Hooley. Instagram, Mr. Warren Hooley, same spelling. Or you can email me, just my name, warrenhooley@gmail.com. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do lots of workshops. I facilitate full-time. Lots of different topics, communication being one of the main ones. But yeah, I really want to help create those communities where people can thrive. And I'm committed to figuring out what actually works to make that come true.
Absolutely. Such a beautiful vision. Thank you for sharing it.
My pleasure.
And with that, we come to the end of this episode of Reclaim Your Radiance. Thank you so much for listening in. If you enjoyed this episode and came away with some valuable insights, the absolute best way you can show your support and appreciation is by sharing it with your friends or on social media. Your support is absolutely invaluable. To connect, find us on Instagram @HellOfAHall or on TikTok @ReclaimYourRadiance. Or you can sign up for our mailing list to receive bonus content and stay in touch with what's happening in the world of Reclaim Your Radiance, including local workshops, retreats, self-love courses, personal one-on-one coaching, and so much more. Head on over to the episode notes in the show description to find those links, and we hope to hear from you soon. All right, everyone, until next time, stay radiant.